Okay, so in this video, we're just going to talk about some formatting points as far as how to format your cells before you actually start your modeling. So if you go into the L folder, reference materials, and you can, work with either of these templates. This is for the biotext, these are for non-biotext. So, the things that we're going to talk about apply to both of these. But so let's just look at the non-biotech template. All right, so the first thing to mention, somewhere in your model, you want to have a cell that explains the units for the model. So here we see that all dollar amounts are in millions, and then there's a note, except the per share data. And this you'll see very frequently in financial statements. And so that's just telling you here, it's letting you know that the rows that talk about share counts, this is the weighted average shares outstanding diluted. So this is not a dollar amount. This is just, in millions of shares. But everything else, throughout the document, when it's referring to the actual financials, these numbers are all in millions. So it's a preference whether you want to have this and display the number with no unit, or what you could do, for example, and you would highlight, the entire sheet before you do this, but I'm just going to show you formatting one row just to show you what it looks like. So you'd highlight the entire sheet, and you'd go here to cells, and we'd go to number, custom. So instead of having the unit declaration, we can build the units directly into each cell. So we'd have a dollar sign here in front, and then we'd have, let's get rid of the decimal. Let's just put a comma, and then we'd have a capital M in back to signify millions. And so each cell that has your financials would be formatted like this. And again, it's just a matter of preference, whether you want to format it this way or whether you want the numbers to appear, cleanly, and you just have this unit declaration up here. So let's put that back the way it was. So as far as decimal points go, when we're talking about very large numbers like this, so this number is 1,257 million. So this is 1.3 billion. We don't need to concern ourselves with the decimals and the numbers after the decimal point, because the numbers are so small that it's not meaningful. So you don't need to add unnecessary digits here. So if you formatted it like this, you might want to think about just getting rid of the decimal altogether and just displaying the numbers this way. Again, it just depends what you're showing. Obviously, if you're showing numbers that are much smaller, then maybe you might want to add a decimal point for added clarity. So now regarding the alignment, so you see all of the cells here. There's this little gap in between the right side of the cell and where the number, the text ends. And so the reason for that is because when you enter your financials, so you see how everything kind of lines up there on the right hand side, and we have a little bit of space there. So again, it's just a matter of preference, but if you wanted to format your entire document that way, you would go back to Format Cells, the Alignment tab here, and then Horizontal Alignment, you would select Right Indent, and you would give it one space there. And you can take off Wrap Text. And so that's how you would get this alignment here. Let's see, what else can we mention? This row 26. So any row that's a total, a subtotal row, just to give it some contrast and have it stand out from the items above it that are being added, you can put it in bold. But what you can also do is you can add this top border to it. So this lets the reader know that all of these numbers were added together, and this is what we get here. And so the way you would do that, you would highlight the cells that you want. You can either go to Format Cells and then Border here, and you select your line style and where you want your border this way. Or what you can do is you can use the toolbar here. If your toolbar has this icon, this is the border icon. So you go down here and you select your line style. These are your different line styles. And then here you select which border you want. So you select top border, and that's how you can get this. Let's see. Anything that's in yellow is our driver cell. So this cell, if you change it, let's change this to 1500. You see all of these cells here are being driven off of this one. So that's why this is called the driver cell. So you'll see this, different ways. In some models, you might have all of the assumptions kind of above the income statement. So you might have a section here, labeled assumptions, and you would have the store count going here, your gross margin, your revenue growth, all of those assumptions would be basically above the model, instead of putting them here. It's really just a preference, whether you want to include it directly in the income statement or above the income statement. But that's what those cells in yellow are for. And then any cell that's a percent. So if you have comps for your retail companies, the same store sales change, your year-over-year change in revenue, your operating income margin, your gross margin, your tax rate. So those types of cells that are percent. Just to add some contrast, you might want to put them in italics. So you can see that's how it is without the italics. And then if we change it back to italics, it just adds a little bit of contrast with the cell that's right above it, that this is basically, commenting on. Let's see, what other formatting points can we mention? You might see in some models you have this indentation for some rows. So again, this is just a style preference. You can indent any subcomponents, and then your subtotal here is not indented. Or if you want to, you might see it done the opposite way. So your subtotal components are not indented, and then your subtotal is indented. And so this again just adds a little bit of contrast. And I think that's it. The main thing is, you just want the model to be clean. You want to make sure that the units are, it's clear whether you have a unit cell up here explaining it or whether the units are built in directly to the cell. You see how the columns, they're just the right size, so we don't have everything in the column, super scrunched together, and we also don't have, tons of unnecessary white space in each column. So these are things that you kind of want to pay attention to, just to make sure that your model is clean and presentable and very easy for the user to read and follow along.